The Bitcoin, Ethereum, and Blockchain Super Conference is coming to Dallas, Texas, February 16, 17, and 18 in 2018. If you know of a better way to get the latest insider knowledge about crypto, to hear directly from the top minds in this field, to interact personally with 800 fellow crypto lovers, hodlers, investors, miners, traders, developers, and founders, then I'd like to hear about it. If you don't, then you don't want to miss out. Register today for the Bitcoin, Ethereum, and Blockchain Super Conference. Go to bitcoinsuperconference.com and register today as a super early bird to get the lowest rates on tickets and hotel rooms. That's bitcoinsuperconference.com.
Welcome to Almost Here, Round the Corner Future Technology podcast with Richard Jacobs. Future technologies poised to transform our lives for better or worse are the focus of this podcast. Almost here means these technologies are now here and starting to be used, or just around the corner, from Bitcoin to artificial intelligence, 3D printing, blockchain, virtual reality, and more.
Hello, everyone, and welcome to the Future Tech Podcast. My name is Josh Thomas, and I'm here today with Pete Wassell of Augmate.io. How you doing, Pete?
Pretty good. Thanks so much for having me today.
Well, glad to have you here. And so, just for clarity here, in case there was, some static on the line, it's Augmate, Augmate. So you can follow along here and take a look at the website, Augmate.io. So, Pete, tell us a little bit about what this actually is.
Sure. So, Augmate, we've got a wearables platform, and we had gotten started a couple years back with wearables, and we had started with smart glasses, and as they've taken a while to get adoption in the enterprise and industry markets, we're now expanding into IoT, and so we believe that wearables are a subset of IoT, and it's a really great market for companies to be able to leverage new devices that talk with the internet, and you need a secure way to do it, and you need a way to manage those devices, and that's what our platform does.
You know, it's interesting that you bring up the glasses. So Google had this Google Glass that came out a few years ago, and you know, it seemed like a really cool thing, and it kind of took off, but it kind of didn't. And then Snap came out with their spectacles, I think about maybe 1 or 2 years ago. And again, it was kind of a cool idea, and they had a great marketing campaign about it. I remember they had these random vending machines that would just pop up without announcement, and you had to go buy these $200 glasses. And that was kind of a flop, too. I mean, a lot of people bought them, but they really didn't take off. Just before we get too much more into this, why do you think that market, which is such a cool idea, why do you think it hasn't really taken off yet?
Well, you know, it's not so much of a consumer play. And in fact, when we had gotten started in this, some of our hardware partners, they were interested in what we were doing, focused on industry and enterprise. And they kind of questioned, why we were taking this approach. And we thought that's where the market was. And they had iterated at that time that they thought this was gaming, entertainment, that kind of thing, more of a consumer side. And I said, well, I don't think the devices are ready for that. I don't think the public is ready for that. There's battery issues, and they would heat it up and all sorts of different things early on. But in the industrial setting, there's a lot of good reasons to use smart glasses. So essentially, we believe that digital information is not where it's needed or expected. And the kind of workers that use this technology, they're deskless workers. So if you're sitting behind a computer, you typically don't need this kind of technology. So these are people that are mobile. And so this is, a person on the factory floor, the construction site, the warehouse, the factory, these kinds of locations. And there are also people who typically need their hands to do their jobs. And so they might have standard operating procedures of how things get done. There might be 36 steps to get something done, and it has to be done precisely. They might be working on dangerous equipment, expensive equipment, or delicate equipment. And by having information in your field of view is a way that people can do workflow. And you can kind of keep workers in a state of flow by providing them instructions. So it improves accuracy and improves efficiency, those types of things.
That's okay. So that's a new perspective that I hadn't heard of before, and it makes sense. So what you're basically saying is, we're walking around, downtown, or sitting in the office or something like that. We're surrounded by technology, and we've got our hands, we've got our phones, we've got our computers. But someone who is intensely involved in a very complex job, that's the person who could really appreciate this technology, because they don't have to use their hands, they don't have to look away from whatever it is. Possibly a surgeon, maybe, for instance. Your hands are busy, you can't use your hands to go and look up information, but you can have it right there in front of you.
Surgeon is a great example. That's a great use case. Typically, surgeons have upwards of about 5 different monitors. So one, for example, might be used for vitals. That's just keeping track of vital statistics. Another one might be a camera, right? That's attached to an instrument that's going into the body. And what happens is, oftentimes the surgeon isn't even looking at the patient or at the body where their hands are located. Their neck is kind of twisted around to look at the monitors. So that's an example of where information would definitely be helpful. And even in the industrial cases, these are folks who traditionally haven't had access to digital information, but could certainly benefit from it. And, one might say, well, there's mobile, right? So why couldn't you have a mobile application? Well, when you go from a mobile device to a wearable, you double the amount of hands that you have. If you're, let's say, in a factory setting, if your mobile device buzzes and you're in a factory, you might not feel that buzz. If it beeps, you might not hear that beep in a factory. And so, like, some of the use cases, especially as we move into IoT, there's sensors that are being put on equipment. So, let's say you're in a manufacturing setting and you're doing assembly line kind of work, and there's an operator who's in charge of the assembly line. Well, the kind of sensors that are on this equipment might come back and say, coolant is low, temperature is high, the machine is vibrating, like crazy. So when it reaches certain thresholds, there's an ability to, let's say, send out an alert. So from a, let's say, machine to human communication standpoint, smart glasses are the way, at least right now, through the eye, the visual field is how you could communicate. So, while that information could be sent to a mobile device, it may not be picked up, let's say by the operator. But when you've got, information in your field of view, it's literally in your face. And then a person can be more responsive to taking care of things, especially in a predictive maintenance kind of setting.
So aside from the glasses, for instance, and you've got sensors on machines, describe the entire universe of wearables that you work with right now. You've got glasses, you've got sensors. Tell me about some other items.
We've got 10 different smart glasses on our platform currently, and from different manufacturers. So we're device agnostic, and smartwatches as well. And what we believe is these are really just a subset. So IoT, essentially what's happened is just a quick history lesson. In 2006, Germany writes a white paper called Industry 4.0. And it ends up being, really what's the fourth industrial revolution. So the first industrial revolution, you have water and steam that's powering equipment. Second industrial revolution, you've got electrons, electricity, and kind of Henry Ford model of assembly. And then the third industrial revolution was really about autonomous robots and more in the setting of, let's say, the automotive industry. And really at that time, after that third industrial revolution, most people felt that all of the efficiency and productivity has been squeezed out of that system. But it, in fact, isn't true. When you move into the fourth industrial revolution, which is about the flow of data and interconnectivity of devices and communication, companies can get upwards of about 30% onto their bottom line by moving into IoT. So you think about a company that's making $100 billion a year. 30% is pretty significant because there's new business models and new ways of doing things that you couldn't really do in a traditional sense. And
Give
so
me a couple of examples for that.
So, for example, and this is, let's say one of 100 different use cases. You might have equipment where, let's say, it's part of some manufacturing kind of equipment. In a traditional sense, a company would buy that equipment and use it, and if there was repair needed, they'd call up a technician, and that person would come on site, and they would, let's say, interview people who were working with that equipment, and then, connect some diagnostic tools, and then, they'd order a part, and then, a couple of days later, the part comes in and install the part, and that process might, take a few days. And, if you're in the kind of business where every hour that line is down, you might be losing $10,000 an hour, right? So you want to think about predictive maintenance in different kinds of ways. So a new model, let's say in IoT, would be the company doesn't own the equipment. They're kind of leasing the equipment, and the data actually is being stored on the cloud. So the technician, if there's an issue, they're going to be alerted at the time when there's a problem. They could get the information off of that, off of the cloud. They might 3D print the part. They might order the part and have it, ready to go, and they show up on site ready to repair it. So in this sense, instead of taking care of one customer, let's say every 3 days, they're seeing 3 customers in one day, right? And then the company is also back online and producing the product that they need to be producing, right? And that's one example of how IoT can make things more efficient and more productive.
Industry 4.0. Water and steam was the first industrial revolution, and then after that it was electricity, and then the third one was robotics. And so the fourth one then is IoT and everything.
Exactly. Yeah, and when they wrote the white paper in Germany, it was all about the marriage of science and industry. And so when it was written in 2006, in 2010, the German cabinet actually got behind it and said, let's put some money into this, and let's encourage industry to embrace this. And so it started in Germany, and quickly other countries in Europe started to see the benefits of it. And then now it's at a worldwide scale. Now that being said, you think about all the benefits of going to IoT. You would, your question to me might be, why wouldn't everyone be running to go do this? Well, there are barriers and there are challenges. So, for example, just to give you some perspective, we're looking at about 50 billion IoT devices just by 2020, about 250 billion devices by 2025, and 1 trillion devices within 20 years, okay, IoT devices, all right? Now, every single one of those devices is an endpoint, and it's got a vulnerability, right, for hacking, and so security is definitely an issue. And then the interoperability of things is also a challenge. What kind of standards are being used? The kind of things that we think about at Augmate are, number one, we're using blockchain. So we're taking a very unique approach to solving the IoT problem. We think that helps with the security side of things, to use distributed ledger and encryption, between devices. And some of the challenges that we think about are there's so much data when you have that many devices. What information do you store on the blockchain, and what information do we store then on our platform, in longer term storage? What processing is done on the device? What process is done on smart contracts within a blockchain, and what processing is done within our platform? So, some of the secret sauce that we really figure out is what do we want to do where? And what makes sense. So the algorithms and tools to be able to make those decisions are very helpful. And some of it has to do with, let's say fog computing, as opposed to, we might not necessarily want to write things up to the cloud, but maybe we'd want to keep things local, and making all those decisions, because so much data is coming off these devices. you have to make those kinds of decisions about what's really important and what's useful for business. And those are the kinds of insights that we really look at.
So Pete, what got you into this industry to begin with?
I tell you what, so my background is I'm a former IBMer, and I worked out of Silicon Valley in one of their R&D labs. And so I was really immersed in a part of the country, part of the world where new technology was just, pretty normal. Every single week there'd be, new technology being announced and people working on things, and just entrepreneurship. And so the difficulty about working for a large corporation is just they move slow. Once they get to a certain size, the bureaucracy, red tape, and processes, they might have good intentions and want to be innovative, but it's difficult for them to become innovative. And so what I saw in Silicon Valley was you'd have big companies, large companies, really buying startups. And it makes sense. You have 5 guys who start a company, who they might have an initial valuation of $5 million, and they try to get that company up to $100 million. And while it would be great to do an IPO, the majority of these startups end up being acquired. And they get up to $100 million by having growth plays every year. So they, one year they might have a marketing play where they're pointing people to the technology. Another year it might be a geography play where they're in the U.S. and they want to have be in markets in Europe and Asia, that kind of thing. So they have these growth plays each year, and really the acquiring company always has a growth play. They take that technology and they sell it to their 100,000 customers. And, it's usually complementary software. Usually it's an acqui-hire. They're picking up those engineers. And just what I had seen in Silicon Valley was technology has a shelf life. It's even when the new technology comes out, it might only be incremental to the last technology, but it's what's being taught in college. And so 5 years, if an engineer doesn't sharpen their skills, they're kind of, not on the latest system. And so you just have this continuous pushing forward of new technology. And what I find fascinating is using technology as an engine for capitalism. You say to yourself, how can this be used to solve problems for customers in the marketplace? And, of course, you got funding coming in one side of that engine, and you want 10x to come out the other side. So you want to be able to bring this to market, solve those problems. And that's what's exciting, pulling teams together to really do that and deliver that. That's what I enjoy doing.
Well, I appreciate you going back and talking about your former IBM days and seeing how there was innovation, but also some red tape. My side story here, my grandfather worked for IBM for 35 years, and he started in 1963 when a computer was about the size of your house. And and he was very proud of that, but he didn't have any kind of formal education. He just, back in the 60s, they would just take somebody that wanted to work on this new computer thing. These days, somebody entering the workforce without this kind of background would probably really struggle because, as you mentioned, the pace is ultra fast and it's only getting faster every year with innovation.
That's right.
Yeah. So, and tell me, as you built this company, Augmate, I want to hear more about that. But what were some of the kind of early challenges that you've been facing with this as you're building this out?
So early on, a lot of the devices that we were using early on, the smart glass devices, were Android-based, and both Android and cloud computing scared a lot of Fortune 500 companies, for security concerns, and we had to really demonstrate why the way that we were implementing the technology was a safe and secure mechanism. And what we discovered was, so we rode that whole hype cycle with the glass devices, and we would build applications, and you'd have great, you could have great pilot programs, you could have a great application, You might save a worker 30 minutes a day. You might reduce errors by 7-8%, on a worker. And you times that by 350 employees, that kind of thing, to figure out that business case or ROI. And that would all play out fine. But at the end of the day, we realized that a lot of companies didn't have the tools or processes to deploy fleets of wearables. And so we ended up building out this management platform to be able to do that. So some of those tools exist for smartphones, but they definitely didn't exist for wearables. And so that's how we got started. And the 10 smart glasses that we use on our platform, we actually have OEM hardware agreements with the companies. So we put provisioning software on a device that talks back to the web. And what we learned was, at that time in the beginning, IT directors needed the ability to, for example, remote wipe a device or reset someone's password or install applications on these wearables. And they needed, really functionality to be able to do that. So we would put provisioning software onto these devices that was actually signed by the keys of the hardware companies. So, we'd share our source code with them so they knew we weren't doing anything malicious. And then we got down to, really an Android or hardware services layer to be able to do those things. So it's not a normal application that just runs on a wearable. It's got special privileges, right? And then through the web, you're able to centrally manage those devices. And regardless if, it's at multiple sites or multiple divisions or departments, we've got parent-child relationships and ways to be able to manage these things with policies and security to do it effectively. So those were some of the things that that's kind of the point of a startup. You're iterating to be able to solve those problems. You're trying to figure out the model of how to take it to market. And so, you have to be adaptive, flexible, and then quickly be able to adjust to the market needs. And so then we built out the platform. This phase 2 that we're working on, IoT it's really about 8 different exponential technologies together that make up IoT. And so, now that we've got storage that's so much cheaper, faster, data networks and that kind of thing, all of this together, essentially, we believe that we haven't moved to robotics yet. So we don't have robots doing the jobs of humans, right? We probably have a good 8 to 10 years before that happens. So the way that machines will be able to communicate is through smart glasses and wearables. And now we're taking this expertise that we have on security and device management and applying that to IoT. Now, one of the challenges there is that we can't do the same method that we did with wearables. So we won't be able to put our software on every IoT device. It's too fragmented. There's just too many devices. And in fact, we ended up doing a distributed ledger blockchain technology, even for our own purposes. It makes sense from a technology strategy and roadmap, but you can't you can't sell software the same way you would traditionally. So, for example, if in the olden days you might have a piece of software that costs $300 and a customer that's got 50 computers, you would know what to charge the customer just by doing the that math equation, right? 50 times 300. But in this sense, there's going to be customers and their IoT devices are going to be different from every other customer. So you might have a 50-cent sensor, right? That's a device, to a $100,000 piece of equipment. That's an IoT device. And so we ended up putting together a point structure because you have to know, are we charging by device? Are we charging by transaction? Are we charging by data? Are we charging by storage of that data? Are we charging by how that data is being shared with their partners in ecosystem? So we put a point system together, which is really our token. So the token is a fractional license access token that has cryptographic coupon attributes. So we're using blockchain to be able to use that token, and why it makes sense is it's used internally for point tracking so that we can actually figure out how to, in a fair and equitable way, charge our customers. But from the outside, they're able to use it to access our platform. So it's one of those utilities that really makes sense because, when you start looking at ICOs and these token offerings that are out there, the question that always comes up is, why blockchain? Why use distributed ledger? This is one of those cases, IoT, that it's a perfect fit. It's a slam dunk as far as I'm concerned. It makes sense to solve this technology challenge with blockchain.
Very good, and you're right. There's a lot of ICOs out there and a lot of tokens that are, we're all trying to figure out why they exist in the first place. So anytime it has utility, it's a good thing. And so as we kind of wrap up here, I wanted to ask you. You mentioned a couple of these cases. We talked about surgeons and industrial factory worker out in the field. We have a variety of listeners here on our podcast from all walks of life. Who do you think would be the most ideal person that should engage with your business in some way? Who are you looking for?
I'll answer it in two parts. While this year we're doing a lot of work with industry, we've recently done projects with UPS, and we've got a very interesting project with smart glasses in a company called BrainPower, which is providing them to autistic kids. So we're working on some pretty interesting projects. In the future, though, we will be doing IoT in a consumer play. And so in the future, we believe everything's going to be data. Even the currency, the future currency is data. And so as people get their Nest thermostats and their doorbells that also have a video camera in them, and smart refrigerators and smart TVs and Alexa, Echo, and these kind of personal assistants, just managing the data and what data gets exchanged and passed back and forth, including wearables when it comes to health trackers and this type of thing. As this data becomes more connected, we'd like to empower the people and humans to be able to manage their own data and not, let's say, let everything go up to the cloud where, some of these companies will control that. They should have an ability to opt into that data and, if appropriate, perhaps even, sell the data if they want to release it. So those are some of the things that we're really looking at over the next year as we, expand from an industry marketplace to consumer.
Very good. Augmate.io, AUGMATE.io. Pete Wassell, thanks very much for joining us here. That'll do it today for our Future Tech podcast. I look forward to seeing everybody next time.
Excellent. My pleasure. Thank you.
The Bitcoin, Ethereum, and Blockchain Super Conference is coming to Dallas, Texas, February 16, 17, and 18 in 2018. If you know of a better way to get the latest insider knowledge about crypto, to hear directly from the top minds in this field, to interact personally with 800 fellow crypto lovers, hodlers, investors, miners, traders, developers, and founders, then I'd like to hear about it. If you don't, then you don't want to miss out. Register today for the Bitcoin, Ethereum, and Blockchain Super Conference. Go to bitcoinsuperconference.com and register today as a super early bird to get the lowest rates on tickets and hotel rooms. That's bitcoinsuperconference.com. You have been listening to Almost Here, Around the Corner Future Technology podcast with Richard Jacobs. Subscribe to this podcast, post a review to discover more future technologies that are poised to transform our lives for better or worse, such as Bitcoin, artificial intelligence, 3D printing, blockchain, virtual reality, and more.